I went to school at Dunwoody Elementary, and I started in September of 1934. Ms. Austin was the first, second, and third grade teacher, but when I got ready to enter the third grade, she had a very large first grade class sign up, and the principal didn't want her to have that many children in one room, so the third grade got pushed up to Ms. Chambers' class, who had the fourth and fifth, and I was in that class until I went to the sixth grade, who Mrs. Davis taught the sixth and seventh, and she was also the principal.
I started school about 1937, I think it was, at Dunwoody Elementary. And Elizabeth Davis was the principal at that time, and she taught the sixth and seventh grades. Mrs. Aldine Chambers was a teacher there, and she taught the fourth and fifth when I went to school. And Miss Nettie Austin taught first, second, and third grade, all in one room. And she was really my favorite teacher. She was such a kind, gentle person, and I just always loved her. But she worked it out where she had plenty of time of course, there were not that many students, even in 3 grades. She might have had 20 students. And I don't know how many was in the school at the time, but it was not a very large school as a whole. We had 3 teachers, and Ms. Davis served as the principal. Ms. Ola Sproul, who was also a relative of ours, was our lunch lady. And she came over every day. She lived across the street from Dunwoody Elementary at that time. And she did all the cooking in the lunchroom. And sometimes if she was running behind, she didn't have any help, so some of the 6th or 7th grade girls would be asked to go in and help put the lunches together. And at that time, when we first started, we didn't have a cafeteria. We just got in line and went into the kitchen and picked up our tray and went back to our desk and ate our lunch. And if I remember right, it was 25 cents a week to eat every day in the lunchroom. But if you had eggs that you wanted to contribute, you could bring a dozen eggs, and that would pay for your lunch for a week. I just remember her Graham biscuits. They were so good. And I decided after I was grown and married and I had my own kids that I was going to try to imitate her Graham biscuits. I made a batch and put them in the freezer, and every morning I'd take out some and feed my youngest daughter a Graham biscuit and sausage for breakfast. One morning I said, "Nancy, I'm so sorry I don't have any more Graham biscuits." She said, "Thank goodness." So she didn't appreciate them as much as I did. Later on, they added on to the school and added a cafeteria, and we were a new kitchen, and we were able to go into the lunchroom. And after they did that, we had movies sometimes at school, especially during the wintertime when we couldn't get outside for recess. We would have a movie, and we'd all get to go in and watch something that was really funny, something we hadn't seen before.
But when I started school, there was only 3 teachers in Dunwoody Elementary School, and Ms. Chambers was one of the 3. I learned more by listening to her, and I guess the fact that I wouldn't talk helped me, and the fact that I could listen and pick up on the information she was teaching.
Had 3 teachers. Mrs. Glenn Austin taught first, second, and third grade, and Mrs. Hattie Chambers taught fourth and fifth, and Mrs. Elizabeth Davis, who was the principal, she taught sixth and seventh. One of the things I remember about it, each teacher knew how to play the piano and had an auditorium. And we'd sing a lot. And do they still do that in school these days?
Miss Chambers was a very strict lady. She didn't put up with any foolishness at all. But I really did like her. When she was doing the classes for the other 2, lessons for the other 2 classes, she assigned us things to do and to be quiet. and one of the boys that was sitting back of me was talking and not doing his assignment, and she threw a pencil at him, and it landed on my desk, and it scared the daylights out of me because I was reading and didn't even know that was going on. But I really did like her because she and her husband went to Williamsburg, Virginia in 1935 or 36, and it was, just a few years after they started, the reconstruction of the 18th century town. And she brought back a bunch of pamphlets that she passed out for the class, and I thought that was the neatest thing I'd ever heard of. And I fell in love with that city, and I had an ongoing love affair with it. And in 1963, I made my first visit to Williamsburg. And as of last April the 1st, my sister and her 3 daughters and myself went to Williamsburg. Jane and her girls had never been, and it was my 41st visit.
Just the fact that it was there and it was rung at a certain time each day to let the whole school know it was either time for lunch or at the end of the day, and so forth. And I have seen that bell in times past. It was quite large and quite heavy. So you had to climb up into the loft of the school to get over to the place where it was. And the first time I saw it, I realized why they didn't mess with it too much, just because of its size.
Mr. Henderson, he was related to that postmaster. Later on, his 2 sons drove the school bus too. And at that time, when the Cap schools worked, the person that drove the bus owned the bus. The county didn't own them. They just paid him by mileage, I guess.
Our playground, we had some basketball goals that was outside. We played a lot of hopscotch. There was a couple of swings that we could use. The boys played together most of the time, and the girls played together most of the time. Always had plenty of homework to do. So we always enjoyed our days outside. We had maypole dances in the spring at school, and sometimes we'd have a little carnival activity, and the kids we always enjoyed that. Everything in the community revolved around either the school or your church and your family.